Welcome to the Kitcar History File series, where we'll be going through the industry's past. We'll be visiting old marks of long ago, some modern ones, some mostly older stuff. A lot of archive information with photographs and information on the cars they made, the people involved, and what happened to them. Hi, welcome to Total Kitcar History Files series. My name's Steve Hole. I'm editor of totalkitcar.com and TKC Mag. Warm welcome if you're new around here, and even if you're old around here, so to speak. A very warm welcome to you too, wherever you are in the world, whatever time of the day it is. Hope you're having a very good day, good week, good year. This episode, we are looking at a very, it's a strange one, this. It's a very well-known kit car, but it's also very underrated in my book. It's called the MINI JEM, and to many people that will need no introduction. One of the 60s plethora of mini-based kits, often confused with the Mini Marcos, for pretty good reason really, I suppose, when we uncover the history of it. And there's a few myths floating around as well, so we're going to try and dispel a few of them. But before we start, I will always tip my hat to the good folk at the Mini Gem Register, Owners Club Register. And they are always a font of information and knowledge on the cars. They can be found at www.minigem.plus.com. But anyway, let's crack on. The history of the car, it actually dates back to about 1964, and a wonderful chap. I never had the honour of meeting him, but I wish I did. A guy called Desmond Gerald Adicott, better known as Dizzy Adicott. Born in 1922 in Scotland, although his parents moved south when he was very young, and which is where he stayed for his rest of his life. Apart from his overseas postings in the RAF, but we'll come to that. At school, he was nicknamed Dismal Desmond because of his sort of introverted persona. However, by 1941, when he joined the RAF, he'd become the life and soul of the party. So something obviously happened between those intervening years, and he was known for being a bit scatty, and a life and soul of the party, as I say. But he was also his nickname Dizzy came from his colleagues in the RAF, and actually he was forever known thereafter as Dizzy Adicott. An incredible chap. Probably as a fan of aviation, and certainly when the UK, I'm proud to say, ruled the world almost in such things, in terms of development in aviation. Dizzy's one of the most revered aviators in UK history. He belongs right up there, in my view, with the likes of Bill Humble, Roland Beaumont, Wimpy Wade, and the one and only Eric Winkle Brown. And as test pilot, Dizzy was up there. In 1941, he started flying on Mosquitoes for the RAF. He then became a test pilot, worked for several of the UK's leading aircraft companies in the 50s and 60s. Also, he was a very accomplished clubman racer. And the Dart name actually came from he was a privateer, but he raced under the Dizzy Adicott Racing Team banner. And that's kind of where the Dart came from. I think it was Dart.A.R.T. but I'm not doing that because that would be silly, and I'm not doing that, so I'm just going to call it Dart. So be aware that I do realise there are dots interspersed between those letters, but I'm not going down that route every time we go there, as I'm sure you'll understand. He was also, he must have been a fairly handy peddler, because he was a works driver for Frank Nichols at Elva Cars in a Formula Junior team in the late 50s. And Frank didn't suffer fools even for 1 second, so he must have been handy. He was also an accomplished, I think we should really do a separate episode on Dizzy Adicott because his life story was incredible. Excuse me. He was also a habitual designer of things, and I think it's with respect, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of them were quite Heath Robinson in nature. There were some hits, of course, the Dark Mini special. He also devised a one-piece tailgate for a Mini Clubman, which I think sold quite well. But he did have some misses as well. There was one particular one that I loved reading about. He designed a garage heater, space heater type thing, which are pretty commonplace these days, although probably frowned upon a little bit by in terms of eco-friendliness, I suppose. Dizzy's one was a diesel-powered contraption, but glowed red, apparently. So rather than get hot and the shroud remaining warm to the touch, the whole thing glowed red and sounded, I'm told, like a cross between an air raid warning siren and a jet engine on afterburners. So that wasn't very good. But he also had this idea for his own car because at the time the Mini had come out in '59. There was a whole host of Mini specials that were came out of that and based on that. And and Dizzy wanted to join the party, so he came up with his own design. It was called the Dart Mini Special. He launched it. Well, first of all, he had Wakefield's, one of the well-known coach builders of the time, over in Byfleet in Surrey. They didn't make him one body; they made him 8 because he had designs to put it into production. He wanted his friend. He commissioned his friend Paul Emery, another well-known name in the specialist car industry from that time, and other people might know him from motorsport. He was a very good driver. He was a car manufacturer, special make kit car indeed, Emery GT. He was an engine tuner of wild repute, particularly on Hillman Imps and Mini A series engines. And he was an all-round good guy, really. Bit of a cad, I think, for his time, which adds to his mystique and interest for me, that's for sure. And he built the prototype for Dizzy. And they launched it at the 1964 Racing Car Show, January 1964, at the Royal Horticultural Halls in Westminster, in central London. Went down very well with the public and trade as alike. Dizzy took some orders from the show, but he got cold feet apparently, and he returned all the deposits. An old friend of mine, a much missed friend, the late Jem Marsh, had been, I think, Marcos was just over a year old at that show, and he was looking for a nice little car to add to his growing his stable he wanted to build, and he really liked the Dart. And so he approached Dizzy with the idea of putting it in production. The two got on like a house on fire, indeed. So, because Jem had served in the Fleet Air Arm in the war, I think he was in the photographic department, but of course, so therefore the two had a bit in common with the flying and stuff. Indeed, Jem had some GRP bodies made for it. Dizzy wasn't particularly happy about that, but went along with it, I'm told, until Jem told me. But then Jem got cold feet. I don't know why. Jem never really spoke to me about it. I tried to probe him many times on that, but he didn't really. All I know is the two never spoke again thereafter. So there must have been some bad blood. So Dizzy was disheartened by this, and he initially he tried to persuade Paul Emery to put it in production on his behalf, but Paul had other things going on. But he did broker a deal with a guy, the parents of a young chap that helped Dizzy quite a lot, a young man by the name of Jeremy Delmar Morgan. And Dizzy brokered that deal with his father, Curtis Delmar Morgan, who paid the princely sum of £750, which I think is about the equivalent of 10 grand in today's money, allowing for inflation, to take take the prototype and rights and moulds and God knows what else for it, or not moulds because he didn't have any at that time. But now Delmar Morgan's an interesting character. Not too much has been written about him over the years, but actually he came from a very, very wealthy family. I think he might have been related to the famous Delmar Morgan as an explorer back in the 19th century, I think. His father was certainly a very wealthy businessman. And his mother, Susan Harrison Brown, her father was a baron. So young Jeremy was heir to quite a pile, I think, in terms of house or property and financial means. And certainly he wasn't wanting for money. So he found himself a nice little workshop come showroom right in the middle of Kensington, in a very swish part of West London. Later well known for being the base of Bristol Cars, of course. And he set up a little company called Gem Developments. So Delmar Morgan acquired the project in '66. And the first 3 cars were sent off to the Nürburgring as part of a 3-man Gem Developments entry for the Nürburgring 500 in Germany. Quite a popular race, that, and 500 kilometres a long way for a mini piece special that had never really turned a wheel in anger before. Delmar Morgan was quite a handy driver himself. He'd raced in Clubman's racing, a Brabham BT8 and also a Lotus 15, I think, although it could have been an 11. Much like his friend and mentor Dizzy had driven a Lotus 7, a 15 and an 11 as well. So 3-car team, Delmar Morgan came second, so he did quite well. It set him up well for what became the Mark 1 Mini Gem, which he launched in January 1967 at the Racing Car Show. Car could clearly see its origins. You could clearly see the origins from the Dart, although the windscreen was now very upright. Body was GRP. Now, in case I mustn't assume that everybody that we're speaking to here will be aware of kit and specialist car terms, really, because we hopefully got some people, even if you have come looking for a fishing video and you're still here, you might like to know that fiberglass, glass fibre and GRP are all very much the same thing. Fiberglass is a trademark, and we try to respect that trademark. It doesn't help when a company turns up calling themselves ABC Fiberglass or similar, but we do, where we can, we respect that trademark, which has been owned by an American company since the very early 60s. So we tend to use glass fibre where we can instead of fiberglass, or GRP, glass reinforced plastic, which just saves a mouthful, really. So, the body was now GRP. He offered 4 levels of kit. One was a basic package at £189, and he'd very cunningly undercut Jem Marsh's own version of the Dart, shall we say, the Mini Marcos, by about £5. Although he also offered comprehensive kit packages, 3 of them, which denoted the engine, the A-series engine that the kit came with. So you could choose the £695 package with an 850cc A-series. £810 would buy you the 1000cc, or top of the shop 1275 GT Cooper S equipped engine was £975. One of Delmar Morgan's final customers before he closed his doors of his London West 8 premises was at one Noel Edmonds, a budding disc jockey, 18 years old back in those 1966, 67. Just started working for the BBC. Now, he bought a Mark 1, one of the last, I think, in 1968. No, sorry, I beg your pardon, 1967. And took 8 weeks to build it. He drove it all around London. He lived in Essex at the time, I think, and but he drove it all around London, turned from BBC. And then when he got a job with pirate radio station Radio Luxembourg, he drove it there and drove it all around Benelux countries. Had a very lucky escape one day, I believe. I don't know if a truck actually hit the Mini Gem or a truck hit a truck that then hit the Mini Gem, but by all accounts, it's a very nasty accident. And I'm led to believe that one of those trucks did actually roll onto the Mini Gem. So it proves the structural integrity of glass fibre as well as that of the Mini Gem. And Edmonds was lucky, I think, to walk away from that unscathed. So once Delmore Morgan had moved on, he became, by the way, a very successful businessman in property, and passed away in 2018, I believe. But he was a very, very successful businessman in subsequent years. Then we have, I mean, there seems to be notable people throughout the Mini Gem's history. It's one of those cars. The next custodian of it, shall we say, was a chap called Robin Statham. Now, this should have really been the makings of the Mini Gem. It should have sold in the thousands, I think, under his control. He was ex-Tornado Cars. He was aided by a guy called Dan Pearce, a very, very clever engineer who'd worked for Speedwell, and John Sprinzel at Speedwell. And Robin Statham ran a minor, and it was a minor empire in the Penn Buckinghamshire area. He traded under the Fellpoint name, put my teeth in. And he had several strings to his bow. One was Robin Statham Motor Accessories, which, as the name implies, sold motor accessories, go faster parts, and was a motor factors that sold go faster parts, I think, and little added extras. So that was a very successful shop come workshop. He also had, I think the Fellpoint name also sold fiberglass spoilers, front splitters, venturized, and wide arches for a variety of production cars, and that was very fashionable back in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, and he did a lot of those. So you'd often see Capris with rear spoilers nailed onto them, Hillman Imps with deep front splitters, and Minis with wide arches. Lots of companies did them, and Robin Statham was one of those. He was also an agent for Reliant Cars, but primarily the Reliant Scimitar. He did quite well with those, and he was a very, very skilled engineer, and by all accounts a nice guy. Also raced, was a good racer, very good racer. Now he acquired the Mini Gem in 1967, soon 6 months or so after Delmore Morgan had launched the Mark 1. He probably sold a few Mark 1s. Excuse the dog barking. We're dog sitting a Dachshund this week, so he likes to get involved. So, but do excuse the barking. He traded his his Mini Gem activities. He traded his Gem cars, and he launched his Mark II version, which he was very proud of, in January 1969 at, guess where, the racing car show. He radically modified it, and in fact his advertising literature of the day proclaimed that he'd made 10 major or fundamental improvements and modifications to the Mini Gem, and he was very proud of those. Notably, he'd moved the windscreen back and raked it 9 inches. He raised the roof slightly, and he smoothed out the door handles. Now, in custom car circles, I think they call that shaved, the door handles, so that it gave a smooth body line and appearance. Not so good on security, because all he did was slide one of the Mini side windows back and reach down and use the catch to undo the door. But that was kind of how he wanted it. Wouldn't be good today, obviously, but it was okay for 1967. Some of the complaints, a lot of the magazines of the day, car magazines, had driven that car and really liked it, but they all complained, the Hot Car and Cars and Car Conversions complained about the same sort of things. And they were, one, the seats were too high, meaning if you're over 5'6" with a crash helmet on, and because of the roof line, you really struggled. They complained about the car overheating because the radiators were in the side of the car, side mounted. I think Delmore Morgan had gone with that. It also meant that the car was incredibly hot. Well, I think Hot Car said it was hotter than a greenhouse in the middle of July in there. This was all stuff that helped. And, of course, the raised roof helped with the crash helmet. And he also lowered the seats, so that was good. And he got some very good publicity out of that. And all seemed set fair. Delmore Morgan had probably shifted about 35 Mark 1s. Now, by the time he'd ceased trading, and we'll come to that in a second, Statham had probably made about 160 or so Mark IIs, so he was going great guns. The elephant in the room as far as Robin was concerned, and I did have the pleasure of meeting him at a show once. He died in 2021, but I did actually talk to him about, it must have been about 2015 at a show or something, and very unassuming chap, very nice chap, came to our stand at a show once. And I asked him about it, but I asked about that time, and it was etched with sadness, obviously, because he also created his own dream car called the Futura, and it was very futuristic in style. If you look at it, the photos here, we've even got a scan of the original brochure, which was a very elaborate affair. It still looks like a spaceship, and a spaceship to these eyes now. It was nothing more really than Beetle based, even though it looked like it was spaceship based, flying saucer based. I wouldn't have wanted to, or anyone to have had an accident in that car actually, because the ingress and exit method was that the roof lifted, and including the windscreen, and the whole ensemble swept off to the right, lifted up to the right, so you walked in and out of the car, simple as that. The trouble was, Robin was so far down the rabbit hole with it and believed so much in it, even though people said to him, you need to rein back on this, or you need to maybe even put it on the back burner for a while, or just forget about it. It was eating money. Every single penny of his profitable businesses went into the Futura. He launched it at guess where in 1971. It went down quite well, but he also had a financial backer who got cold feet as well and withdrew the backing. And ultimately, it sent him into liquidation, which was a great shame because he had a lot going for him with the whole lot of the whole ensemble. Everything he was doing was successful hitherto. So he went into administration in July 1971. Now, the liquidators wanted to keep the whole thing together. They obviously saw it as a going concern. The trouble was, any interested parties really wanted to cherry pick, and most people just wanted the Mini Gem. But what the liquidators did in the end, or the administrator did in the end, he did separate into several chunks. So he wanted to sell the Mini Gem with the Futura as a going concern, but a lot of people had seen what the Futura had done to Robin and didn't want to touch it. One in particular was a guy called Ian Hall, who'd raced successfully a Mini Gem, very successfully, and he wanted to take over the Mini Gem. But he pulled out when he found about the Futura. We should also mention actually that Robin had also developed a lightweight, the car that he'd raced, and there's one picture of it there, particularly with this audio video, or this audio file that shows him lifting a back wheel, which he's clearly trying. That was an interesting car, lighter gauge glass fibre. He used a 1275 GT Cooper S gear linkage. And he'd also adjusted the front suspension so that he could add in or dial in a bit more negative camber. And it was all round a fiendishly quick thing. Tuned engine as well with that. He'd also created an estate car. Now, a estate car of the Mini Gem. Now that we're obviously very proud of our archive here at TKC, Total Kit Car. I didn't know I had that photo until last week when we were putting this together. I just didn't know it was in there, and that's a very, very rare photo. Probably never been seen before, that one. And I've not seen a picture of a Mini Gem estate for a very, very long time. So I'm pleased, and it's in colour, so I'm very pleased to, even though it's a little bit edgy, that photo, sketchy, I'm very pleased to be able to share it with you here. So he did all that. So he had quite a little business going, really. And as I said, the Mini Gem was selling very well, and he was doing very nicely and developing it. But the Futura was his downfall, was his nemesis. In the end, a guy called Bob Telford enters the scene. Now, Bob Telford had worked for Colin Chapman at Lotus at Cheshunt. Didn't want to move to Norfolk, to Hethel, so he went off and did his own thing. Created a company called High Performance Mouldings. Moved first to Cricklade, which I think is in Somerset. Anyone that's, if I've offended anyone, if that's the wrong county, forgive me, but I think it's in Somerset. And yeah, I think Cricklade is that bit on the A303 where you have to slow down to 30 miles an hour, and there's about 15 speed cameras, or there used to be. Anyway, Telford was helped by a guy called Eric Bogg, who I believe might have been his financier. I'm not sure. He was described as his friend. Didn't really last very long with it. He took it over in 1970. He was back in production in 1971, He moved to Wombwell in South Yorkshire, which I think is near Barnsley, in 72. Didn't really do much with the project. He did introduce, incidentally, it just to be said, an opening tailgate. Until that point, you couldn't get in the very big window at the back. You couldn't get into it from the exterior, from outside, only from inside the car. So he came up with an opening tailgate kit, which amounted to a couple of little gas rams and some draft excluder. Sold it for £8.50. Personally, I would have been dead scared to have made the first cut in that tailgate. I think it's a measure 64 times, maybe cut once, and then measure another 100 times, just to ensure you got it right. But so he did that, and that became part of the kit package, and it was available to customers, to existing customers, obviously. And then he went into administration, which was not surprising, really. He actually, by the way, he actually bought the project with the full knowledge and the desire to put the Futura back into production. So he actually wanted the Futura, and he actually part built a Futura, a second Futura. Although that I don't know whatever happened to that, because that didn't go with the Mini Gem when it was subsequently sold again. So next we have the last proper custodian of the Mini Gem, the last person certainly to offer it for commercial sale in kit form, was a chap called Malcolm Fell. Another myth dispelled here. Fell Point was Robin Statham's company. It had nothing to do with Malcolm Fell. That's just coincidence. They didn't know each other. Malcolm Fell was a very talented engineer. He was a joiner, welder, general metal worker for Vickers, the shipbuilders in Barrow and Furness. Car enthusiast, Mini Gem enthusiast. I think he actually owned one, had built one previously. He fancied a crack at car manufacturing, and he picked up the project, traded under the name of Malcolm Fell. He was part-time to start with, but when he sold 4 kits very quickly, he thought he'd give it a go for full-time. So he took the very brave decision to leave I would imagine, a very well-paid job at the time, to go and build Mini Gems. His first workshop was at his house. It was 750 square foot. Now, I guarantee wherever you're sitting at the moment listening to this is bigger than 750 square foot. It's said that when he prepared shells for the car, he had to get 4 people, or him and 3 other people, had to turn the bodies on the side to get through the very tight doorway, only doorway into his little workshop. And I think he got a bit fed up with that, so he then moved to an old chemical works in Barrow, which was a giant by comparison at 2,000 square foot. Not exactly luxurious, but bigger than what he was struggling with. Malcolm did actually come out with a Mark III. But he only sold about a dozen of them, I think. Now, his Mark III had a longer nose, and he did that was the main change, and he introduced a few other changes to it as well, but didn't do very much with it. And by 1975, I think, or 74, late 74, the Mini Gem, as we know it, was no more. I don't know if he went into liquidation or he just got fed up, but he certainly was advising existing customers or potentially new customers, to hurry up while stocks last, the doors are closing, get your spares while you can. And he certainly put out missives like that, which was interesting. So he had planned to, or knew he was closing, shall we say. And that was it as far as we're concerned. Although the moulds, there was rumours that Mark II and Mark III moulds had been destroyed by Fell in a fit of pique. That clearly wasn't fully true. It transpires they ended up in a barn in Norfolk. Interestingly, Delmar Morgan had lived the latter years of his life in Norfolk. I don't know if he was living in Norfolk by the mid-70s and it was his barn. I don't think it was, but it may have been. But certainly they were in Norfolk. The good guys at the Mini Gem register located them, along with another really nice guy Mike Phillips, who traded for a while in the early 2000s, late 90s as Harlequin kit cars. Very enthusiastic chap, very big fan of the Mini Gem. He was marketing body shells for a while, Mark III body shells, until he decided to pack up, and I think he moved back to his native Isle of Man. Last heard of in France, and I hope he and his wife and family are very well. Very nice man, Mike Phillips. But the Mini Gem register have the moulds, and I think they can supply spares and stuff like that to those that want them. So the car hasn't been made for nearly 50 years, but he's still incredibly highly regarded. He's a real part of kit car history in the UK, and he's incredibly well thought of, as it should be. A real child of its time, a lovely thing. But that really wasn't the end of the story. A guy came up to me one year at Stoneleigh. Sorry, for those that don't know, when we mention Stoneleigh in the kit car trade, the people that know that Stoneleigh was the venue for the National Kit Car Motor Show. So people just referred to it as Stoneleigh. It's now moved to Malvern, actually, but it was Stoneleigh is Stoneleigh. If you knew, you knew. So that's kind of where I mentioned Stoneleigh. So a guy came up to our stand at Stoneleigh and said he had a Mini Gem Mark IV. So that was news to my ears, and I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Oh yeah, it's a Mini Gem Mark IV, built by a guy called Roger King," which then dawned on me, and I think we should mention Roger King here. Roger King was a craft teacher from Bedfordshire who'd bought a Mini Gem Mark II, I think, from Statham. Gone his own way with it very much, and was an innovative chap. He sold advertising space on his very outstanding Mini Gem special, shall we say, because it was a special, to local companies in the area, who he said that because his car was very special, it attracted attention. So how hard would it be, or what harm would it do if they paid him £5 or something for him to put their logo on his car, so then customers that saw his car could perhaps respond to the adverts once they finished gawping at his car. And I think that car had quite a few logos on it. One day, though, he and his wife Christine, they decided, I think, to make a move to Northumberland, and why wouldn't you? What a beautiful county that is. So they went house hunting. He was still teaching by this time, and as a key worker, he was able to get a brand new council house in Roxbury, I think it was, perhaps. But when they went to a party, it changed their lives one day up in Northumberland. They met the rural business development manager, who they got talking to. Roger had wanted to give up teaching, I believe. And this chap was kind of the catalyst that sparked the company that was Kingfisher Cars. And the car that came out of that was a variation or development of Roger's Mini Gem Mark II, the Kingfisher Sprint, which, as the photos here show, had pumped up arches. He changed quite a few elements on the car, but he's, like we've said all the way along, every variant of the Mini Gem can trace its looks and its ancestry, obviously, back to Dizzy's Dart. He probably sold a dozen of them. He offered all sorts. He had a guy called Jim Deakin working with him. I don't know how that came about, but Jim Deakin, if you know your Cosworth history, Jim Deakin was a very talented engine builder, had worked on the DFV, had built DFVs and variants of same. I think he built the engine that the late Patrick Depailler, won the Spanish Grand Prix. I think might have been in a Tyrrell, perhaps. Correct me if I'm wrong. And he also, Rick Mears' IndyCar from Indy 500 in the same year, 1979. That won the Indy with Jim Deakin built Cosworth DFV. So very interesting guy to have teamed up with. I don't know if he'd retired to Northumberland or he was a friend of Roger King's, but he certainly built engines for Roger. And Roger offered some very tasty Mini A Series engines to accompany his Mini Sprint. His Sprint, Kingfisher Sprint, including a turbocharged version that delivered about 130 horsepower, I think. I've heard it said. I mean, he had a brand new unit that came with the rural grant that he got. I'd heard it said that although he was very enthusiastic, tried really hard, quality of the mini. The keep saying mini sprint. That's another story for another day, another episode. Neville Trickett. Wave the Neville Trickett flag, that's for sure. What a great man he was, and it was a pleasure and honour to know him. But I digress. So I've been told that the Kingfisher Sprint quality was variable, and certainly no two were ever the same. But that petered out quite quickly afterwards. I think it didn't last for long, so I don't quite know what happened, whether they just ran out of money or just got fed up. But that's an interesting footnote to the story, and I think it's right we include it here. So that was it, really. So that's the story of the Mini Gem. I hope you enjoyed that, because I certainly enjoyed putting that together. Very convoluted story, lots of in-depth stuff on it, and I hope you stayed with me. If you like that video, if you like this one, can you please, if you haven't already subscribed, could you just click the subscribe button? It won't cost you a penny piece. We'd love you to come back for more. And as I said, everybody is welcome. If you could also, and I'm told if you could help our algorithm by smashing that like button, that really helps the channel and gets it in more people's feeds. Hopefully people looking at car stuff, maybe not fishing or cooking, although nothing wrong with any of those. And everybody's welcome. So thank you very much for your time, and I bid you a good day and look forward to welcoming you here again very soon.